And at the tender age of 12, just right after elementary school, I suddenly got this obsession to become a farmer and work the land. At that time, there was an agricultural school in a city far away from my home, which was also a boarding school. So my parents allowed me to go there. I sat the exams, and I managed to get in. I was so happy at the time. And I was happy because it was so much fun to have around 200 kids of that age, remember just around the age of 12, staying together, especially in the afternoons and the weekends. And we got together and we did all the silly stuff together. At that time, athletics, volleyball, and basketball were very competitive among different schools. The games at the end of the school year were a major event all over Cyprus. And one thing I will never forget is the first time the gymnastics teacher walked into our class and said, "We know for sure that all of you will become athletes and players. What we don't know now is what sport you'll be competing, but soon we will find that out." That statement I will never forget, and it was also a big life lesson for me. Why? Because we do not know what it is that we are good at, and we should not be afraid to try. And believe it or not, I tried. And I now have 3 medals somewhere in my cupboard that I'm very proud of. This was not the first time that a dedicated educator had such a strong and positive influence in my life. After some very difficult months during the Turkish invasion and a body full of adrenaline, I ended up in a UK college that was right in the middle of the working class East End of London. And again, I was lucky enough there to have 2 lecturers that had a profound effect on me and made me see the world from a completely different perspective. It was the first time in my life that I met real-life activists and had the privilege to see how they work. Among organizing demonstrations for women abortion rights, they supported squatters, the homeless, and they also love to explore both the city and the countryside. And all students had an open invitation to join them in their work, and I was always there. I never missed anything. I remember late one afternoon, we were reading the UK abortion statistics. We were trying to interpret the numbers from different points of view in order for them to test and build their arguments. And this is important, because if you plan to fight an issue, you need to learn as much as possible about this issue. And this is what they did at the time with the abortion statistics, because you must always remember that in a highly contested issue like this, you have to get your facts right. So access to information is an important prerequisite in assessing an issue and also the course that will follow later on. So although this was a long time ago, if you search the internet, you will still find the details of the huge demonstrations that started in 1975 opposing government abortion bill in London especially. This was a couple that they loved Suffolk, just north of London. It was their favorite area. It had deep history, agriculture, thatched houses, natural beauty, and wildlife. One weekend, we were wandering around beautiful Suffolk with small postcards with some of John Constable's beautiful and romantic paintings. And the challenge was to find the exact position he was standing to do his painting. And one spot we did find, and I will never forget it. You can see it there on the board. How much my educators affected my life was not lost on me. Some years later, I ended up being an educator myself. Through my college teaching and later on as a university lecturer, like all my colleagues, I tried to have positive influence on my students and get them interested about society. In fact, when people asked me what I do for a living, the answer I gave was that I train future activists. And believe me, it is so satisfying when I now see my students doing events or taking part in actions aimed at protecting us and the environment. But it's not only people. My time in the magical Pentadactylos Mountains, the beauty of the British countryside, together with my college teachers, were the turning points in my becoming an environmentalist and an activist. And the timing was absolutely right. In the 1970s, apart from hard rock and supergroups that we still listen to, apart from social activism, we also saw environmental groups standing up and fighting for the environment. In Germany, in the 1970s, there were mass demonstrations against nuclear power plants and the transport of radioactive materials. In 1985, Greenpeace was protesting against the French government's nuclear testing in the Pacific. And the French government, in order to stop them, they sent the French Secret Service, who launched an operation known with the silly code name Satanique, of all names, and they planted 2 bombs and sank the ship Rainbow Warrior. Unfortunately, they also killed 1 crew member as well. The fight never ends. Nowadays, we see Greenpeace and other activists in small boats. They are trying, for instance, to stop whale hunting. And this is something that I always admired. It was so obvious to me that if you want to save and protect nature, or if you want to improve people's lives, or even just protect basic human rights, you have to fight for it. And you have to fight because some decision makers are ignorant. You have to fight because they do not have a clue on how to do things properly. You have to fight because they are lazy. And unfortunately, you have to fight because they have other motives. And fighting for such issues is not easy, as your opponents might be a local authority, or even worse, a whole ministry with unlimited resources. But if you want to be effective, you need to have a good understanding of the subject, perhaps see how other countries deal with it, and prepare your arguments. I still remember how much I cherished EU information documents I found in libraries abroad. These were real eye-openers on how to develop environmentally friendly policies. Soon after I started work, I got involved in local environmental groups, and I started writing letters and articles in newspapers. For a while, I even set up my computer to send hundreds of faxes, and as you know, faxes take a long time to send, and the familiar noise filled my house for many days and nights. Tension was very high, especially during the time that we were fighting against the decision to build a desalination plant. Environmental NGOs opposed the plant. We considered this the last option of a series of measures that we could have adopted. Cost, but mostly the damage to marine life, were major concerns to us. And believe me, it felt very peculiar and sad to me when, after so many years, the community near the desalination plant approached me last month asking for help, as the whole area around the return pipe into the sea is now dead, and the damage is expanding gradually. The fight for both the environment and other social issues is still on, but we now have more people interested, and some good legal tools that are available to us as well. To me, one of the biggest successes of the European environmental movement was the convention put together by a group of inspired people. And this convention was signed in the Danish city of Aarhus in 1998 and is known as the Aarhus Convention. This convention gives citizens 3 very important environmental rights. The right to access environmental information from public authorities. The right to participate in decision-making process through public consultations. And if you still don't agree with the decision they took, governments have to provide access to justice so that you can take public authorities to court. All this now appear in environmental EU directives or regulations, and they have to be implemented by member states. Some do it well, some don't. But we need to keep up the pressure. And let me give you a good example where these rights that I just explained were applied successfully here in Cyprus. Just a few kilometers from here, on the shores of Limassol, there is a stretch of land full of tall eucalyptus trees, a beautiful place that belongs to the forestry department. The area is known as Dasoudi, which means a small forest. You can see it there. Under the trees, there are some small buildings that were built many years ago by CTO. CTO is the Cyprus Tourist Organization. CTO decided to replace the existing buildings that you can see there with a large restaurant, a multi-story car park, and some additional recreation buildings. Nobody knew about these plans. But when CTO filed for town planning permits in 2011, a local newspaper wrote about it, and all hell broke loose. Like everything else these days, a Facebook group was formed, thousands subscribed, and we had the first mass demonstration in Limassol. I was the commissioner for the environment at the time, and soon after the first demos, we started collaborating to organize our actions. Step one was to find out what the designs entailed. We used the access to information right to get hold of the designs. Town planning at the beginning was not very helpful, but after a few phone calls, we managed to get the plans. Access to information. Second step was to ask for the right to public consultation. Once CTO realized that they had a revolt of the local population, they decided to do a public hearing. Notice, a public hearing to present their plans, not a public consultation. That meeting was, of course, a disaster. Demonstrations not only continued, but support to the cause grew rapidly. The third step was to discuss the issue in a parliamentary committee. During the meeting, CTO did not find any allies or any support in the parliamentary meeting. And not only that, the Auditor General of the Republic gave strict warnings to them. So eventually, it appeared that the CTO abandoned the project. But we had this feeling of uncertainty as to what was going to happen. And in 2014, we saw what was planned. In 2014, government issued a draft law that states that a forest beach can, among other things, be given to private owners. Give forest beach to private owners. So the fight to save Dasoudi is not over. We are currently trying to see what we can do in order to save the area and other forest beach areas on the island. These basic environmental rights proved to be so successful that they are now extended through other conventions to the administration procedures of European cities. The convention, for instance, for local authorities includes, among other things, very detailed description of citizen rights, details of public access to local authority documents, and various forms of participation in decision-making. And if you look back to the way humanity handled itself in recent history, we did a lot of atrocities and a lot of stupid things as well. And unfortunately, we still do. But with regards to environmental issues, one could in the past claim ignorance and lack of scientific support for the decisions that we made then. But today we have all the statistics. We have all the scientific data. We have all the computer models. And we can also accurately assess future behavior. Through the internet, one can find all sorts of information. And we can easily acquire knowledge on a specific topic of interest, whatever the topic. One must, of course, be extremely careful and be able to differentiate between pseudoscience from real science. And of course, be able to identify conspiracy theories as well. Many will agree that most of the problems that we'll soon have to deal with will be originated from greed and the large corporations that are now getting to be very influential with very strong lobbying powers. And the only way to move forward and towards a sustainable future is to get people involved. We need to tackle climate change. And if you want to find out how badly you are positioned here in the Mediterranean, all you have to do is see the new Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Before the Flood, because they use us as a bad example. We have too much plastic in our oceans. Air pollution kills thousands every year in Europe. And in Cyprus, much more than 1,000 every year. We waste too much energy. We throw away too much food. We have a water shortage. We fail to protect adequately our nature sites and our reserves. We have bad town planning that allows us to build everywhere. And we have many, many problems. So please, please, don't just sit there. Get involved. Thank you.